appreciation what the Birkat HaMazon. How do you like that? And they all answer. All the ladies answer to the theme. That's great. How do you like that? You're 100% right. That's what it says. Shulchan Aruch, the Alkut Yosef. Everybody says that's what the women have to. And Moshe Feinstein. Everybody across the board. Okay. We are Memtet of a base 49b. So again, yesterday, what we were focusing on yesterday was the person made a mistake, and he did not say Ya'aleh v'yavo, did not say Ritzei, right? He wasn't on top of his game. So people got to remember they got to be on top of their game to make sure. No, it's going to be. I think let's check the calendar. It's not Saturday because it would probably be Sunday, Monday, but let me just check the calendar over here. We're coming to Rosh Chodesh Elul. Rosh Chodesh Elul is Sunday and Monday. So Motzei Shabbat, this Saturday night, is Rosh Chodesh. And as you know, Rosh Chodesh Elul is the month before Rosh Hashanah, and it's a time period that we got to up our game, as they say. We have to improve a lot in our actions. It's a month of getting ready for the Yom Adin. You have a court case. When you have a court case, in order for you to be successful, you sent to the group, right? In order for you to be successful on a court case, you know, what do people do when they go have a court case? They hire a lawyer and they prepare for the case. Does anybody ever come into a case unprepared? No. Does that make sense to come in unprepared? It's not a good idea, right? So that's the idea. 30 Elul is already the 30 days before Rosh Hashanah, that we're already preparing for the case. The Ashkenazim will be blowing the shofar throughout the month. They're getting ready, and Sardim will be starting Slichot. You're going to be starting Slichot. Next week will be Slichot mode. Good morning, and that's all about getting ready for the Yom Adin Rosh Hashanah. But remember, when you learn Torah, we say hello to Mike. We only do Slichot.
Good morning, Rabbi.
Good morning. Have a great day. Depending when Rosh Hashanah comes out, whether we'll do it with starting the week of or the week before, or a little bit over a week before. Morning, Mike. We're just saying we're getting ready, that we're 30 days. I mean, Motzei Shabbat, Sunday and Monday is Rosh Chodesh Elul, the time period to get ready for Rosh Hashanah. And remember, when you learn Torah, the more Torah you learn, morning, Mr. Haber, that's going to bring you closer to Hashem. Morning. So therefore, that's going to bring, as we say, Hashivenu Avinu Torah, return us to your Torah. The more we learn, the more we're inspired, and the more we will keep the mitzvot. So that's something that we have to apply ourselves more. That will help us for the Yom Adin or Rosh Hashanah. Okay, Mr. Haber is here. We're ready to start. The Gemara says, Ad Kama Mezam, we're on a new piece. Ad Kama Mezam is the quote from the Mishnah. The Mishnah, this is the quote over here. Ad Kama Mezam. And that means how much you need to go ahead and eat. You know, you want someone to join into a zimun, how much he needs to eat in order to join into zimun, or to, let's say, we say, l'chatchila, you should go ahead and everybody should have bread, right? The three, according to the opinion that says that in order to make a zimun, you need all three to have bread. That's one opinion. There's another opinion that says, no, you don't need three to have bread. Two can have bread and one can have mezonot. There's another opinion, even the third guy doesn't have mezonot. There's other types of food you could count them in. But when we talk about having bread, how much bread do you need to have in order to go ahead and join into the zimun, to make a zimun? So that was the question back on the Mishnah. Good morning, Shmuel. Good morning, Avram. That was the question back on the Mishnah, Ad Kama Mezamnin. And the Mishnah said, two opinions. Ad Kazayit, one opinion says, you need to have a kazayit of bread in order to go ahead and do the zimun. And the other opinion says, Rabbi Yehuda Omer, you need to have the size of an egg at the beitzah. You have two opinions in the Mishnah, how much you have to eat in order to recite Birkat HaMazon and to be part of a zimun. So one opinion says the size of an olive, kazayit, the standard, the general size of food. When we talk about food, usually how much matzah you have to eat, kazayit. When the Torah says this karet for eating chametz, how much chametz? Size of an olive. Torah says there's lashes for eating pork. How much pork? A kazayit. A kazayit is usually there are exceptions, like many things in life, there's exceptions to the rule. On Yom Kippur, in order to get the serious punishment, is only if you eat more than a kazayit, a date. It's a different reason. But generally, the kazayit is the standard. So one opinion in the Mishnah says that is the standard to say Birkat HaMazon. You need to have a kazayit of bread. If you go ahead and you have a little bite Friday night, if someone's wife, takes a little bit of just eats a little bite, that she doesn't have a kazayit, she cannot say Birkat HaMazon. Correct? Mr. Haber, we spoke about that in the past. You need to make sure that the women have a kazayit. They're very diet conscious. They got to have an ounce of challah Shabbat in order to say Birkat HaMazon. There's another opinion that says, no, you need double that. You need the size of an egg. But we don't hold that way. They need like around 2 ounces. We don't hold that. We say even after 1 ounce, 1 slice of bread, you say Birkat HaMazon. Yes, and you have to eat the bread in a certain amount of time. Could be Rabbi Vadia says maybe in around 7 minutes. Shiva, I think around that area of time. I'm not being exact, but that area, that window. Some say it's better between 2. Some give you 2 to 4 minutes. Some give you up to 9 minutes. But I think Rabbi Vadia gives. There are different opinions between 2 to 9 minutes. I think Rabbi Vadia's opinion is around 7 minutes or so. To eat that ounce over that amount of time. That din is a rabbinic law. The Torah law is if you're satiated, if you're having just 1 slice of bread doesn't make you sabbat generally. Therefore, you will not have the biblical obligation of Birkat HaMazon unless you're satiated. But the Mishnah says, in order for you to be chayiv, at least on a rabbinic level, you have to have either a kazayit or a beitzah. That's the machlokas. And similarly, when you're joining into a zimun, if let's say you have a zimun let's say you have 2 people that had bread and the third guy had mezonot. How much mezonot does he need to eat? Also a kazayit. Or if you count the guy in who had some other type of food, also has to be a kazayit. If it's a salad, it needs to be a kazayit. If it's a liquid, it has to be a reviyat. Right? Now, the Gemara wants to understand what is the idea of why does one opinion say kazayit and one opinion says kibeitzah? Why does one opinion say that the size, what's the basis for their argument? What is it all about? Why does one rabbi say, you know what? You got to have the size of a kazayit. The other rabbi says, no, you got to have the size of a what? Of an egg. What's the reason? There's the law and there's the reason. We want to understand what's it all about. And then the Gemara is going to question this law from a different law. And it must seem to be an apparent contradiction. That's the setup of the Gemara. So now see, Morris, you have the Gemara? The Memra, the Gemara says, the Rameya, you're going to say, the Mishnah, because the first opinion of the Mishnah, which does not have a name to it, that is Rameya. So you're going to tell me that Rameya choshev lekazayit. Rameya considers a kazayit something of chashivut. That's something of importance. And since there was a kazayit, that's why he says you chayiv to do zimun, because you had a kazayit, because it's something of significance. A kazayit, that's why he says kazayit. Why does he say they have to eat a kazayit of bread in order for to have the zimun? Because he holds that that's a significant amount. However, Rabbi Yehuda says, kibeitzah, he says that he holds that what's considered something of importance he says, is the kibetza, right? And therefore, he said it's not enough to have the size of an olive. It's too small. The olive is too small. 1 ounce, one slice of bread is too small, according to Rabbi Yehuda, to be obligated in Zimun and to say Berachos Hamazon. You need, according to Rabbi Yehuda, you have to have something more significant. It's too little. It's too small. It's called a very temporary type of eating. And therefore, he says you will not have Berachos Hamazon on such a thing. Right? Like the Gemara says in Sukkah. If you eat less than an egg, if I'm saying if that's not considered it's considered very temporary eating, and therefore he says it's only calling more permanent eating when you have around the egg size. That's already considered more permanent. So the Gemara says, okay, that's what you're telling me. The argument here between Rabbi Yehuda and Meir, but the Gemara says we heard the opposite. We have another story. Another case where we heard the opposite. What was the opposite? Titnan. We learned in the Mishnah. The Mishnah says, if a guy was going to slaughter his Korban Pesach, he went on the road to Eretz Yisrael, he went to Yerushalayim, and he remembers that, you know what, I left some chametz in a certain place. He forgot he had chametz in a certain place. So what's the law? So the law is, if he's able to go back to his house, you know what? He hid some chametz from the children or from the grandchildren, and he forgot to get rid of that chametz. So the Chachamim say, what do the Chachamim say? It's not good enough just to mevatel the chametz, just to say I'll make a nullification. Kol chamira v'chamira dika b'shuti. I make a nullification of the chametz. Chachamim say you have to not only make a nullification, you also have to get rid of the chametz. Burn the chametz, make a bedikat. But the guy, but he didn't get rid of his chametz. He still has his chametz in his house. It was not sold to a guy, and it was not sold to the guy. It's his chametz. So what do you do? So what does it say? It says like this: if he could go back home and get rid of the chametz, destroy it, and then come back to Yerushalayim and do the Korban Pesach, that's what he should do. But if he doesn't have time to do both, because if he's going to go back home, he's not going to make it back on time. There's a small window on Erev Pesach to go ahead and slaughter the Korban Pesach. It's just in the afternoon, the morning, Sam. It's just the afternoon. We welcome Sammy back. It's only in the afternoon, Erev Pesach. Let's say if Pesach will be tonight, you have just from 1 o'clock on this afternoon to just the short window. So if he won't have enough time, he does bittul. He nullifies the chametz. He says, any chametz that I own, I want to nullify it. Should be like the dust of the earth, right? That's what he does. And then the Mishnah continues. The Mishnah, similarly, we have another case. Mi sheyatza meYerushalayim. A person who left Jerusalem. Now, in Yerushalayim, the halacha is when you have, let's say, a korban kosher kalim, you have a korban, let's say, shlamim, certain korban, certain offering, you have to eat it in Jerusalem. Not only you have to eat it in Jerusalem, but if you take the korban, the food, outside of Jerusalem, it becomes invalid. It becomes pasul. It has to remain in Jerusalem. You can't take it outside of Jerusalem. So if the guy went ahead, he left Jerusalem, and what's the law if you take it out of Jerusalem? Then you got to burn it. You can't eat it, you got to burn it. So now here's the case. He left Jerusalem and he realizes, you know what? I have food with me from the korban, and it's outside of Jerusalem. And now what do I got to do? I got to burn it. So does he have to go back to Jerusalem to burn it or not? So it depends. How close is he to the Beit HaMikdash? Could he see the Beit HaMikdash? Did he pass the area that he can't see? Beit HaMikdash is a place you're able to, for different parts of Jerusalem, areas outside Jerusalem, you could see, depending on your vision where you are. If he could still see Jerusalem, the Beit HaMikdash, then he's close enough that he should go back to and burn it, and there's a certain place he should burn it. If not, he could burn it wherever he is. That's what the Gemara says. V'chein mi sheyotza meYerushalayim. Someone who left Jerusalem. V'niska shehaya biyado basa kodesh. We're now 3 lines before the wide lines of the Gemara. You got it? 3, 4 lines. Okay, Misha Yotza Mishalayim. Someone left Jerusalem in Niska shehaya biyado basa kodesh. And how about you two? And he had in his hand basa kodesh, holy meat that became invalid because it left the walls of Jerusalem and it needs to be burnt. So im avah sofim, if he passed the place that Rashi says it's the place called Sofim. It's called Sofim because that's the place that you could see the Beit HaMikdash. Sofim is to see. So if you pass that place and you can't see the Beit HaMikdash anymore, so then you burn it wherever you are because you're already considered away from the Beit HaMikdash. But in Lav, but if you did not go that far, if you're still able to see the Holy Temple, the Beit HaMikdash, so what do? You go back. Chozeh l'sofo, you go back, l'fnei bira. There's a place that's called Bira. That's a place by the Harabayit. There's a place where there's a big place where they have all the burnt stuff, all the ashes they put over there that they burn. That's this place that they burn the Kochi Kalim. That if Karbanot became invalid, there's a specific place by the Temple Mount that they have an area where they burn it and they store it and they have the ashes over there. So that's what he has to do. He has to go back to that area since he's close by. And and he uses the wood that would be used generally to put the korban. The Torah says you always have to have the mizbeach, always has to have wood on the mizbeach. Always keep the fire burning, symbolic of the Jew. You always have to always be burning, always be on fire, and use that wood. There's a special halacha that the wood that would be used for a korban, that's the wood you use to burn this korban, this meat that became disqualified, invalid because it left the walls of Jerusalem. Is that clear, Mr. Haber? Is that clear? So now the Gemara says, Ad kama him chozrim. So now the Gemara says, Ad kama him chozrim. How much chametz did you leave in your house that you remember I left chametz in my house? I got to go back for it. If I could go back, if I have time to go back and come back to process the korban pesach, I go back. That means, wait a minute, if I left a quarter of an ounce of chametz, do I have to go back for that? Or would it be enough? I just have to nullify it. Where am I at? Now, listen, you can't own any amount of chametz on pesach, right? But maybe but the question is, but there's something called nullification. Would we allow you just to nullify the chametz if it's much less, if it's a very small amount, a half an ounce, even though it's something, it's chametz? But so that's what the Gemara says. There is a minimum size of the chametz that would require you to go back to get it and burn it, and not just use bits of nullification. So we have a machloket over there. One opinion says this law that you got to go back and destroy it and come back to process the korban if you have enough time. That's only if you left the size of chametz the size of a kezayit, an olive size. Less than an olive size, even though you have time to go back and forth to burn it and then come back to bring your korban pesach. If it was less than a kezayit, we don't require you to go back. We just say, make the nullification wherever you are. The other opinion says no. It has to be the size of an egg. If it's less than the size of an egg, we also won't require you to go back. If it's too small of a size to require you to go back, we'll just say to nullify in your place. And similarly is the meat that became disqualified. The meat that came, we said, if you had meat from the korban and it left Jerusalem, and as a result of leaving Jerusalem, it became what? Invalid. And it needs to be burnt. And we said that if you see the Beit HaMikdash, we said you go back to burn it in the area of the Beit HaMikdash. by the Harabayit. So there's also a machloket. How much meat is it that became invalid that you would require me to go back if I could see the Beit HaMikdash? So one opinion says if it's less than a kazayit, we're not going to ask you to go back. If it's less than an olive size, you can burn it where you are, even though you can see the Beit HaMikdash. You're not so far away. But since it's such an insignificant amount, it's less than a kazayit, you could burn it where you are. The other opinion says not only that, no, you got up to an egg size. As long as it's not, if it's less than an egg, then you do not got to go back to burn it by the Harabayit. You can burn it wherever you want, even though you see the Beit HaMikdash. Is everybody with me? I want to know if everybody's here. Morris, Mr. Haber, Shmuley, Avrami, is it Mike? Is everybody here? These are the cases. We have the case of Zimun, we have the case of Chametz, and we have the case of the meat that left the old sin. Those are the three cases that we're dealing with. The Chametz and the meat have the same law. Zimun seems to have the same law, the same machloket, the same argument, but the Gemara's question is, the rabbis who said by Zimun, one opinion says a kazayit, you have to have an olive size to say it's Zimun. The other opinion says you need an egg. The Gemara's question is that we find those rabbis say the total opposite, exactly the opposite, when it comes to the chametz and when it comes to the meat, that the rabbi who said by Zimun, a kazayit, an olive size is enough to make a Zimun. When it came to the chametz, he says the law has to be a size of an egg. In order for us to tell you, you have to go back. And the one who said, and similarly, the one who said, and you need an egg by Zimun, when it came to the chametz, he said a kazayit is enough to tell you to go back. So that's the Gemara's question. Morris, is it clear? The Gemara's question is, we have an apparent contradiction. We have the rabbi who said a kazayit over here, said an egg over there. The one who said an egg over here, said a kazayit over there. That's the Gemara's contradiction. Is it clear? I need to know if it's clear. So the Gemara says, now, let's see it again. The Meimra de Reb Meir. You have it? We're going up about 5 lines before the white lines. Are you going to say Reb Meir Choshev the Kazayit? He considers the Kazayit an important amount. And therefore, you can make a Zimun. You can make a Zimun just having an olive side. And Rabbi Yehuda says Kibesa. Rabbi Yehuda says you have to have a what? The size of an egg to be something of significance. If you have less than an egg, less than 2 ounces, you will not make a Zimun. We heard these same rabbis say the opposite. It's not. We learned in a Mishnah. Right? Someone left Jerusalem 3 lines before the line, 4 lines before the white line. In this Kodesh, he left Jerusalem and he remembered that he has on him meat that was holy, and it left Jerusalem. And if it leaves the walls of Jerusalem, you have to burn it. The im of a sofim, if he left the place where he could see the Beit HaMikdash, and he's not able to see the Beit HaMikdash from where he is, Sorfovim Komo. He burns it wherever he is now. V'im lav, and if not, what? If he's able to see the Beit HaMikdash, Chozev v'sorfo lifnei habira me'aseh ha'maracha. He goes back in front of the Harabayis, by the Harabayis, and he burns it over there. Ad kamahim chozrim, and how much meat does he need to have that we would require him to go back to burn it, and not to burn it in his place? He has to go back by the Beit HaMikdash area to burn it. Rameya here says Zev is there kibeitza. Zev is that means the story of the chametz and the story of the meat. You need the size of an egg. Rabbi Yehuda Omer Zev is Zev b'kazayit. Rabbi Yehuda says in both cases the kazayit. So we see that they're saying the total opposite by the case of the meat and the case of the chametz. That's the Gemara's question. So comes Omer Rabbi Yochanan, and Rabbi Yochanan is not afraid to say this. He says Muchlefet hashita. You have to change the shita. Even though you had the recording in our Mishnah, the Rameh says that Kazayit is enough to make the Zimun. You have to change it around. You have to say the Rameh holds the size of an egg, and Rabbi Yehuda holds the size of a Kazayis, and therefore they're not arguing. They're saying exactly what all the three cases are lined up. They're all saying the same thing in all three cases, because the Gemara's first answer is that we thought until now Rameya was the opinion of a Kazayas, and Yehuda was a Beitza. And it says, you know what, we made a mistake in our recording of the opinions of which rabbi said what, and really Rameya says the size of an egg, as we find by the other Mishnah over there in Psachim. That's what the Gemara says. Change around the names of the rabbis of the Mishnah, and therefore there's not going to be any contradiction. However, Abaye says, no, you don't need to change the names of the Mishnah. You don't need to, because as Mr. Habo many times says, different case could be a different reason. And if it's a different reason, so therefore the fact that therefore they can have different laws at different cases. Not all cases are the same. Good morning, Joseph, and welcome back again. And we're happy to see that Joseph is coming back strong. So the Gemara says, they're arguing when it comes to Zimun, they're arguing based on the pasuk in the Torah. What's the pasuk in the Torah? He says the pasuk says v'achalta v'savata uveirachta, right? So Rameya holds v'achalta zu achila. Achalta refers to eating, and savata, when it says you're satiated, yushasiya, that's drinking. That's how he understands the pasuk is telling us. When you eat and when you drink, when you eat and you drink, and achila, and in general, achila is kazayit. In general, what's called eating, when the Torah says don't eat chametz, eat matzah, it's a kazayit. So therefore, he translates the idea when the Torah says ba'achalta, you should eat. If you eat v'savata, and you're satiated, he says, you go ahead and you eat some bread, the size of a kazayit, and you go ahead and you drink some wine, or usually I presume that the sea is referring to wine, and that will go ahead and obligate you in the Birkat Hamazon. Now, however, Rabbi Yehuda says no. When it says v'achalta v'savata, it's referring to achila sheyesh bo sviyah. It needs to be an eating that will satiate you, an eating that will fill you up. That the bread itself should be something of substance. The bread itself should fill you up, not that you're going to feel full and satiated from the drink. I mean, according to Rameya, even though you weren't satiated from the food, you were satiated from the drink. You had the meat, you had the bread and the wine. So he said, and I did not have eating. I only ate a size of an olive. He said that's minat Torah. You have a mitzvah of Birkat Hamazon, because you had food and you had drink, even though the drink satiated you, and not the bread. However, Rabbi Yehuda says no. The satiation has to be you're full from the bread. And therefore, he said, achila sheish b'sviyah. Has to be a type of eating that you're satiated. And that's kibetzah. That's the size of an egg. And therefore, you in order to say Birkat Hamazon and Zimun, you would require an egg. However, when it comes to going back to the chametz, or when it comes to going back to burn the meat that left Jerusalem and whether you need to go back or not, that bisvara pligi. The rabbis over there are arguing on logic. What's the question? That Rebbe Meir Sava, the Rebbe Meir holds, it's Chazarato, going back is Ketumato. It's just like the shear of Tumah, meaning in order for something, let's say we had this food that became invalid because it left the walls of Jerusalem. Now we have another halacha. If you have a food that became tamei, something that's tamei, that's contaminated, in order for it to contaminate something else, the thing has to have the size of an egg to be able to have the power to contaminate something else. We find that the significance to sometimes we have the shear, the measurement of an egg, because that's considered a significant amount but if you have less than that, it does not have the ability to contaminate something else. So the same way that we find that the size of, when it comes to contaminate, has to be the size of an egg, so too, if I'm going to require you to go back to burn it by the Beis Hamikdash area, it has to be something that has the size of an egg, because that's a significant size. Less than the significant size of an egg, you will not have to go back. And similarly by chametz, if it's less than the size of an egg, since tumah is considered not significant if it's less than the egg, you cannot contaminate something else. So too regarding chametz, you will not have to go back. Rabbi Yehuda Sava, Rabbi Yehuda holds chazarato. He says that isuro. He looks at chazarato ki isuro. He looks at going back like the isur of chametz, like the isur of the meat. Meaning to say, how much chametz do I need to eat to violate the prohibition of eating chametz on Pesach, and that the person will get that serious punishment? The person has to eat a kazayit. So if that's the amount of the prohibition of chametz, so therefore I have to go back if I left the size of the kazayit. Similarly, what's the size of meat that if it goes out, what's the size when the Torah says there's a prohibition of using that meat, and there'll be punishment for the meat that left the walls of Jerusalem? What's that I can't eat that meat? What's that size? That size is a kazayit, and it's an olive size. So too, I got to go back to go ahead and burn that size if it's the size of an olive. Because in this prohibition, we see the chashivut, the importance of an olive. So that's what the Gemara said. Yehuda Sava isura ma ki isura ma isuro bekazayit, just like the isur is the kazayit, is the size of a olive. So av chazarato bekazayit. So too, going back is also a kazayit. So that concludes the Gemara until the Mishnah, and then tomorrow we'll continue with the Gemara is going to talk about going back to Zimun on the proper text of is there any change of text from 3 people to 4 people, and so on and so forth. We'll see more about that tomorrow. And remember, when you're joining into a Zimun, you have to make sure you have a kazayit, as we saw today, and that's the law. The law does not require you to have the size of an egg. Size of kazayit is enough to join into a Zimun. And and remember, if someone's asking you they want to include you to get to number 10, right? Let's say there's 7 that wash and 3 that eat something else. You have to make sure those 3 people eat the size of the kazayit of something. Whatever you're going to eat, you have a vegetable or something, whatever they give you, a little piece of cake, whatever it is, you have to make sure you have a kazayit in order to join in. Similarly, if you're having a drink, you have to have at least a reviyat, 3 ounces. Have a great day, everybody. All the best. Thank you. And we'll be looking forward to seeing everybody tomorrow. Some people live, some people on Zoom, and all the